Welcome to the Podcast for Inquiry, brought to you by the Centre for Inquiry Canada, a national educational charity supporting your community for reason, compassion, and secular humanist values. You have answers, we have questions. I'm your host, Leslie Rosenblood, board member and secular chair for CFIC. Welcome. I speak today with Maryam Namazie on Podcast for Inquiry. Maryam is a multi-award-winning Iranian-born campaigner and writer living in the UK. She is currently the spokesperson of One Law for All and the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain. During decades of activism work, Maryam has organized actions and protests in solidarity with the women's revolution in Iran. She has produced and hosted a weekly TV program broadcast in Iran in Persian and English called Bread and Roses. She has executive produced Women Leaving Islam and published The Woman's Quran. With Ex-Muslims International, she has organized Apostasy Day and Atheist Day. I start my conversation with Maryam about the Paris Appeal, released in December 2023. We talk about what it is and what it contains and why it is necessary today. We also talk about World Hijab Day and what the hijab means and represents. And we end our conversation with her analysis and what needs to happen regarding Quebec's religious symbols law. I'm very proud to bring you my conversation with Maryam Namazie. Maryam Namazie, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today on Podcast for Inquiry.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to bring you on because I've known your name for some time, and this is a pleasure to actually get to speak with you. But recently, just a couple of months ago in December, you and your organization of ex-Muslims of the UK put together what you called the Paris Appeal. And so can you tell me what it is and what led you to release it?
Sure. The Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain has been organizing conferences since 2014. Actually, this year, when we have our conference in Oslo at the end of August, beginning of September, it will be the 10th anniversary of these conferences. And the idea behind these conferences is to celebrate dissent, particularly in a world where we see the rise of fundamentalism and the corresponding rise of authoritarianism and lack of rights and freedoms, from freedom of conscience and expression to dissent. We find it really important at this time to, one, show our strength in numbers, because we do believe that we are many, the ex-Muslims, the free thinkers, the atheists, the secularists across the globe. There are many of us, and very often we're not seen or heard. And so this is one of the ideas behind this whole Celebrating Dissent conference. And we've had them in London, in Amsterdam, and Cologne. We're going to have one in Oslo. And of course, the one you're talking about was in Paris in December 8th to 9th. And the date was an important date because that is the anniversary of the law which separates church from state in France. It's one of the laws that have established laïcité as an important principle for a democratic society in France, but also across the globe. And so on that anniversary, we organized, in a sense, this conference which celebrated laïcité as part of the Celebrating Dissent conference. And the Paris Appeal came out of that. So we had speakers and contributors from practically every continent around the globe, many of them survivors and resistors against religious fundamentalisms of all kinds. And of course, at that conference, we made a call to secularists or laics of the world to unite, to stand together in the face of this religious fundamentalism that we're seeing not just, Islamic fundamentalism, but we're seeing the rise of, for example, the Christian right, the Jewish right, Buddhist right, Hindu right, you name it. And so it was a call for Laics of the world to unite. And CFI actually was one of the sponsors of this conference. Thank you, CFI, as was Freedom from Religion Foundation, National Secular Society, Charlie Hebdo, which is this wonderful, of course, everybody knows, publication that is critical of religion and has lost, staff members and cartoonists to Islamism in various attacks.
Yes. Now you've mentioned laics and secularists, and I'm wondering if those are synonymous terms.
Mm.
I took French until about grade 8 or so, or grade 10, and have used it only very sparingly since. And that's going back a few decades. So I really can't claim anything but the most passing of familiarity with the French language. And so I am aware enough to know that the connotation of laïcité or of laïc is different than the connotation of secularism, even though they are similar concepts. They're not quite the same. And so I could you, for our listeners, explain what a laïc is, and or laïcité, and how that differs from the commonly held perception of what secularism is, or what a secularist is?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's really an important point. Before I say that, though, I must mention that the conference in Paris that the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain organized was done with Laics Sans Frontières, which is a new organization that was set up by Nadia Al-Fanni. I don't know if many of you should know Nadia Al-Fanni. She's a French-Tunisian filmmaker. She's made some amazing films if you haven't seen it. One of them is Laïcité, Inshallah.
That's a great title.
It's a great title. Actually, the original title was Neither Gods Nor Masters, but there were some problems in using that title for obvious reasons. And so it became Laïcité, Inshallah. But she is one of those people that has been stressing the importance of even are using the term laïcité instead of secularism. And of course, it's easy for us to use the term secularism because it's English and it gives some idea of what we're talking about. But, it's really Nadia Al-Fanni's insistence that we must use laïcité to make it very clear what we're talking about. And so at this conference, we made it a point, even though it was quite difficult, to use a French term when you're discussing an issue in English. But I think fundamentally, when you look at the term laïcité, it is a strict separation of religion from the state. And in a sense, what it means is that the state is incompetent in the affairs of religion. So it has no say on religion. It doesn't privilege religion, one or all or any of them, and it sees it as a different realm altogether. When it comes to the state, the educational system, the judicial system, these are all must be laïc and separate from religion. Whereas, for example, when we use the term secularism, well, we know very much so that if you take England, the UK, for example, where I live right now, we use that term. It's used here in a way that very often privileges religions to some extent, because when it talks about secularism, it actually means equal tolerance of religions. And so in a sense, we can see then in Britain, for example, which we know is not really a secular state, given the fact that it's got a Church of England, the king is the head of the church, they've got bishops in the House of Lords, I mean, they've got prayers in Parliament. I mean, you would find that fascinating in North America, and they have prayers at schools, for example. So there is, religion has quite a say, even though it's a very secularized society. But
That plays
here,
on the two different meanings of secular. One is the government neutrality in matters of religion, or the separation of church and state on the one hand, and the, I guess, the religious observance of the population on the other. When you talk about a secular society, it means that people aren't going to church or temple or mosque, but a secular governance is a completely different issue,
exactly.
both relating to religion versus non-religion, but very different in their implications.
But also here in the UK, for example, when they
Mm-hmm.
talk about secularism, it does feed into a sort of communalism, because what it does is it looks at it as an issue of equal tolerance for all religions. And tolerance is not a bad thing, of course. We should always promote tolerance, but it basically gives religion a space that it shouldn't have when we're talking about the state or the educational system. And so we use the term laicity as a way of stressing the need for separation as opposed to equal tolerance of all religions. Because then in the UK situation, we see, for example, because there are X thousands of Church of England schools, therefore we must have X thousands Islamic schools and Jewish schools and X schools and Y schools, which, in my opinion, is divisive, and particularly when it comes to children. I mean, education is meant to level the playing field, not, divide and separate children based on their parents' religion. So, it causes a huge lot of other problems. Like in the UK, we've got Sharia courts, we've got Beth Din, which are Jewish courts, where you see some of the greatest violations of women's rights taking place. But again, this sort of equal tolerance can lead to very dangerous situations for women's rights, for human rights, whereas separation in the Laics sense of the word is that, the government is not competent in the area of religion. It's separate. That's your private matter, which is what religion really needs to be. It's your private belief. Keep it out of the state, keep it out of the educational system, keep it out of the law.
And okay, so that's very helpful. Thank you. And thus, and so you brought together a conference, and then you released in December 2023 the Paris Appeal. So can you summarize for our listeners what is in the Paris Appeal? And I've got a few questions. I've got a few questions about that, but I want to hear you talk about it, about its content and the purpose for releasing this. I'm not even sure what to call it: a statement, a manifesto, a call to
Yeah.
arms. How would you characterize it?
I would say all of those. I would say it is a call to arms. It is a call to Laics across the globe to unite. The religious right is united, no matter how much they hate each other. They always work together when push comes to shove in order to deny rights and to maintain their power. And it's important for Laics across the globe to also unite. And I think the point that was being made at the conference, but also in this appeal, is that you cannot have democratic societies, you cannot have basic freedoms and rights if you do not have like societies and separation of religion from the state. And of course, that's why one of the first point of this appeal is that laïcité is a fundamental principle for democracy, for pluralism, for universal rights, for freedoms in all societies. And in it, we also stress the fact that we need this complete separation. We need to be able to restrict religious and cultural laws which are adversely affecting people's rights and their lives, and that freedom of conscience, freedom of expression, the right to leave and change religion and not to believe in any religion. These are also very much part of fundamental rights, the right to apostasy and blasphemy, for example, and also equality of women and men, and the defense of those who are being persecuted because they are criticizing and exercising their freedom of conscience and expression. And this right for everyone to live and love as they choose. I mean, I think these all are things that do not categorically exist when you live in a theocracy. And in a sense, what we're saying is that the more religion has a role in the state, in the law, in the educational system, in the judicial system, to that corresponding extent, people will not have rights. And we're not, and the thing about the world we live in today, unfortunately, is that these are not theoretical discussions. We can see in a place like Iran, in a place like Afghanistan, in minority communities also in the West, that rights are very much limited when the religious right or the fundamentalists are either in the state or in power.
Right, and I think that list is of rights that people should be entitled to is something that everyone listening to this podcast will agree with. They seem fairly basic, and I will agree with your observation that they are the ones that are routinely denied in theocratic states. I want to quote a piece of it because there's something in here that I don't think I understand, and so I would like some clarification. And one of your premises in the Paris Appeal is because we fight obscurantism, fundamentalism, communitarianism. And I think I understand the first two. Obscurantism is just making things not comprehensible and hiding behind some rhetoric, and fundamentalism I think is something we all understand, and it's like the literal interpretation of some sacred scroll that is not open to question and simply must be blindly obeyed. But then there's communitarianism, and I'm not sure I understand what that is, and because of that, at this point, as I'm asking the question, I don't know why we should fight communitarianism. So can you please tell me what you mean by that and why it is something that we should object to and fight, as you call for?
I think if you come from a minority background, you will understand communitarianism very well, because what it is really is the way in which we are divided into homogenized communities. And as a result, we are seen to be one and the same with those who are in power in our minority communities. And therefore, it sort of helps to justify the lack of rights and the limits that are imposed on our community. So let me just give you an example. If you look at the Muslim community, for example, one of the things that we try to challenge with the establishment of the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain in 2007, which was really at the beginning of the start of this movement that's become huge and universal, was the fact that the Muslim community is seen as a homogenous group that likes Sharia law, that likes the veil, that likes mullahs ruling our lives, that ruling on us, that enjoy living in Islamic states and theocracies. And the point we were trying to make is, no, we also have atheists amongst us, we have secularists or laics amongst us, and we have dissent in the same way that any other so-called community or society has. And it's this sort of homogenization that always ends up in favor of those who are in power. And at this point in time, it is the religious right that has power, and therefore our culture, our values, our way of life is seen to be one and the same as what the fundamentalists want. And so it's the primacy of identity politics. But again, whose identity? It's the identity, because it's those in power that determine what your identity is, what your culture is, and what you're meant to do. And when communities and identities are homogenized in this way, you end up not only giving more power to those who are oppressive in the so-called communities or societies, but you're also denying any sort of dissent or voices of resistance. And when you do hear those voices of resistance, because your idea is that this community is homogenous, then we're the Uncle Toms or the coconuts or the Islamophobes or the self-hating, bunch, because we're going against the actual narrative, which is not a real narrative, because reality will tell us that all societies are plural, all communities are plural. There is no such thing as a homogeneous society or community in the United States, in Canada, in Britain. People are fighting all the time on various issues, from Brexit to refugee rights to the cutting of NHS resources, for example, the National Health Service. But somehow, when it comes to those of us from Muslim backgrounds, it's as if we don't have any of those political and social struggles and fights. Right. And I think that's the thing with communitarianism. It feeds into supporting the religious right, really, at the base of it.
So just because you come from were born in a Muslim country, or were born to Muslim parents, there's an assumption that you share a whole range of philosophical and political beliefs, and it's just this one tiny, perhaps significant part of your identity is then used to define the entirety of it. And that sort of blanket assumption about what you must believe and support is what you are denying and fighting back against. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, definitely. But also to add that I wouldn't call our societies Muslim countries in the same way that we wouldn't really call the United States or Britain a Christian country.
Oh, there's many people in the States that very, very vociferously argue that the United States is a Christian country. I
Right,
personally
right,
disagree with that, but
right.
there are those that would defend that premise.
Exactly. And the point is that those who defend that premise are those that want to make it so. And I
Yes.
think it's very much those who say Iran is an Islamic society are those who want to make sure that it remains Islamic, even though people are being killed to oppose it. So I think the language is also very important. And, part of that sort of laïc resistance against the fundamentalists is not to let them normalize their
Right. So to be very
project.
specific when you're talking about an Islamic government, but not the people and not the society.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
All right. Thank you. That does clear that up for me. Thank you. I want to quote another thing that you call for in the Paris Declaration. I've got a couple of questions about this as well. You call for equality between women and men and citizenship rights for all. And so when you talk about equality between men and women, does that mean guaranteeing equality of opportunities for both, or enforcing an equality of results in various aspects of society?
I suppose, there's equality, as you mentioned, that it has so many different meanings and could mean so many different things. But we're also looking at a context in which, for example, particularly when you're looking at theocratic states and rules, and here, for those of us who come from Muslim backgrounds, we know very well that it's highly discriminatory against women. And there is no equality between women and men in any aspect of society, whether you're talking about legally, socially, politically, and so on. And so, we're talking about a system where, for example, a woman's testimony in a court of Sharia law would be considered half that of a man. So you would need two women to be able to challenge the testimony of one man.
And no, I understand that would be true in like the Islamic courts of Iran, for example. Is that true for the Sharia courts in England?
Yes, because it's Sharia. So
Really? So in England, if you in England, a woman's testimony in a Sharia court, which is not all courts, but in a Sharia court in England, it is a woman's testimony is weighed at half the value of a man's today.
of course, because
I
you're
find that
talk,
shocking.
it
Okay,
is shocking.
I find that when I say I find that hard to I find that hard to believe, not because I disbelieve you, but just because that my picture of I don't view England as an ideal country or beyond critique, but that would be the case in England today is is shocking to me. It's good to know, but I'm stunned, and I just thought I'd share that it's good to learn these things because I would have assumed or I had assumed otherwise,
Hmm.
and
Well,
it's
let's
amazing.
get back to that, because I think we should find it shocking that there are Sharia courts in Britain, given the fact that they are religious courts
Hmm.
and people should be considered citizens. And I'm not sure why a white British woman, for example, should have, all the rights that are available and that have been fought for by the women's rights movement in Britain and across the world, for example, when she goes to a civil court, but that a minority woman from a Muslim background, should not have the same rights. So, and the testimony is just one aspect of it, which I think we could go into. But to give you some other examples, and again, that applies also in Britain, it applies in Saudi Arabia, it applies in any country, in Afghanistan, where there is religious law and
Hmm.
Sharia law, because it's highly not only discriminatory against women, so not just on the issue of testimony, for example, but women and girls get half the inheritance of boys, for example, and men, to the fact that women have very limited rights to divorce, men have unilateral right to divorce, women only have child custody until a preset age. After that, it goes to the father, irrespective of the welfare of the child. Again, this is happening in Iran, but it's happening in Sharia courts in Britain as well, because that is the law, that is religious law.
Hmm.
And religious law, if it is going to be obeyed, it's got to be obeyed whether you live in Britain or whether you live in Iran. And of
Okay,
course, it's
this leads
also.
to two questions that I didn't think I was going to be talking about, but I just have to ask.
Mm,
And the first is, why are there religious courts at all in England? And secondly, how what does a divorce or a child uh, child welfare case where the child is going to live, which parent, how is it determined whether a person is going to resolve these disputes through the secular courts or through a religious court? So those are two questions that I have
mm,
that
mm,
this brings up.
mm. Well, why Sharia courts again comes back to the issue of communitarianism and the fact that you have communities, this is what they want, and therefore this is what they get.
Why
Whereas,
would any Muslim woman, based on what you've said, I'm sorry to interrupt, but why would any Muslim woman, based on what you've said, want or ask for a Sharia court if there's a non-religious court that gives her equal standing with every other citizen of the land?
yeah, I mean, that is, I think, the first question anyone should be asking is why would, if you're saying that this is what Muslim women want because it's their culture and their religion, the next rational question would be to say why? How could that even be possible?
Hmm.
And so I think it goes back to the argument that we've been making for many years now, is that if you look at Sharia courts, for example, in Britain, or even in many countries in the Middle East and North Africa, South Asia, they came into being after the rise of the contemporary Islamist movement, which is after the Iranian revolution was expropriated by the Islamist movement and it became an Islamic Republic of Iran. And since then, we've seen a rise of Sharia courts. So if this is what Muslims want, why is the first Sharia court in Britain in the 80s? Again, look at when it started. And our argument is that this is not what Muslims want, it's what the Islamists want. It's part of their project in maintaining their rule. And that includes the hijab, it includes Sharia courts, and sex segregation, and all the things that Islamic schools, all the things that come with this project. And so effectively, our argument is that it's not necessarily what women want, it's what the Islamists want, but it's packaged as a demand of Muslims.
And this brings us back to the communitarian aspect
Exactly.
of things that we were talking about a few minutes ago. So how is it that, I don't approve and I don't like the theocratic nature of countries like Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and so on. But I kind of view that as outside of my control. I personally have no influence on that. But when we're talking about at least a nominally secular country like England, why would a British citizen, an English citizen, go through a Sharia court? Like how is a case determined to go through a secular court versus a Sharia court? Is it voluntary? Is it mandated? I don't know and would like to know.
Yeah, so I think it's quite complicated because the Sharia courts are considered arbitration tribunals. And as you know, there are 300 arbitration tribunals in the UK. There are arbitration tribunals across the globe where people go to specific courts that are specialized in order to have someone judge that court that has that specialization. So, for example, you will have employment arbitration tribunals where people go there because it's a specialized issue and they want the person making that
makes
decision.
sense if it's an employment dispute.
Makes complete sense. But this is what the Sharia courts are using. They're saying that as they want to arbitrate Sharia for those who want to decide on their divorce, child custody, domestic violence, you name it, in this way. The argument we've been making to the government, which is falling on deaf ears, even though we've collected lots of evidence and testimonies from women, as well as shown the links between Islamists and these courts. They were set up by people who have links with various theocratic governments and movements. What we've explained is that in an arbitration tribunal, the two parties have to be on equal footing. There is no way that women and men are on equal footing in a Sharia court because a woman's testimony is worth half that of a man's. In the area of divorce, for example, women don't have they have very limited rights to divorce, and men can say, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you 3 times, and they're divorced, and they can have 4 wives, up to 4 wives.
And is that's true in England today?
Of course, because they're not necessarily registered. And this is the other point that we've been making, is that there's a lot of pressure on women to go to these courts, because if they don't, they won't be considered good Muslims. Right. They could be shunned by their families. There is all that pressure and threats and intimidation surrounding women being sort of compelled in a way to go, that isn't being taken into consideration.
Yeah, I can certainly see if I was a selfish Muslim man and was having a child custody dispute or really any kind of interaction with the courts, why I would prefer a Sharia court to a secular one if my dispute is with a woman. If for no other reason, then my testimony will count for twice as much as the other party. But that doesn't. That's not really consistent with my sense of justice and human rights, equality between the sexes, among other things.
Yeah, for sure. I think that If you look at the divorces, for example, that are taking place,
Hmm.
like women going for divorces to Sharia courts, very often the husband refuses to give a divorce because it's his unilateral right to decide. And he doesn't really need to divorce her because he can get three other wives. If you're Shia, you can get innumerable temporary wives as well. And so, in that sense, if a woman is desperate and she wants to keep her standing in the community, she doesn't want to feel like she's disobeying Islamic rules. Even if the Sharia court, let's say, gives her a divorce, she has to give up the dowry or mehriye, the money that's owed to her by her husband in case of divorce. So effectively, she's paying the husband to get a divorce via the Sharia courts. So it's a farce. And apart from that, I mean, there's so many instances where they have um, legitimized violence against women, saying, well, what exactly have you done to cause this to happen? And, marriage is
Yes.
sacred and divorce is looked down upon. So you shouldn't really be divorcing your husband, and trying to mediate in situations where if it was a non-Muslim woman facing this sort of violence from a non-Muslim man, they would definitely not even be allowed. She would have an order of protection against him rather than being forced to go to mediation in an Islamic court. So it's actually a scandal. But because it's happening to minority women, because of this idea that this is their culture, this is their religion, we're going to leave them to it. I think the government doesn't want to take action. Also, I think the government mistakenly believes that by appeasing the Islamist movement in this area, it can reduce Islamic terrorism in another area. But I think, from my perspective, these are all linked because from the terrorism aspect to it, to the Sharia court aspect, to the compulsory veiling of women aspect, these are all linked and intertwined. And the more one progresses, the stronger this movement becomes.
Right. I mean, I imagine that there's a perception within the government that's similar to one issue here in Canada, in Ontario, which is the province in which I live. We, for historical reasons, fully fund Catholic schools right from kindergarten through to the end of high school. And there is a perception within government that if that system were to be shut down or merged or folded into the secular school system, which everyone else attends, that they would lose a tremendous amount of the Catholic vote. And if you lose the Catholic
Mm,
vote, you lose the potential to be elected. And of course, every government wants to be reelected, so
mm,
they just don't touch the separate school system. Where the Center for Inquiry Canada, and along with other groups, earlier this month had a petition read within the provincial legislature um, uh, to stop the funding of the separate school system,
mm,
the Catholic school system in Ontario. And so I'm very interested to see what the response from the government is going to be. But I
mm.
can see that these same, I imagine, electoral considerations and pressures are consistent across the pond in England as well. And it's an uphill battle, and I wish you all the best and give you at least all the moral support that I can.
Mhm.
And this was not what I had expected to be talking about, but I want to thank you for educating me and enlightening me about the current state of what's happening in England. I want to come back. I've got another couple questions about the Paris appeal, and then I'll talk about a couple of other things with you. You call for citizenship rights for all.
Mhm.
And I'd like you to, I'm not sure, I can think of like 3 or 4 different things that you might mean by this call. Um, and since I have the opportunity to speak with you, can you tell me what is it that you're
Mm.
calling for when you say you're demanding citizenship rights for all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the issue again goes back to this idea that if you come from a minority community, let's say, a Muslim minority background,
Hmm.
you are considered the Muslim community and you're segregated, and the government leaves the responsibility of this minority community to those in power. So it's Islamic organizations or, mullahs and sheikhs and imams. And what we're saying is that, minority or not, we are all citizens. We are citizens under and before the law, and we are due and we deserve and we have the right to be treated as citizens, not as minority communities. And I think that the idea that before we belong to any minority group or belief group, we are individuals, we are citizens, and we should have full citizenship rights.
So even if someone from this minority group is, like, in a legal and formal sense, a citizen of England, you're calling for a more socially inclusive definition or a socially inclusive understanding of what that citizenship entails?
Well, there might be, on paper, they might be citizens of Britain, but they are relegated to Sharia courts. They are going to Islamic schools. They are going to segregated, sort of, they live in ghettoized and segregated so-called minority community areas. And, if anything happens, like if there's violence against women, it's not the responsibility of the state, it's the responsibility of the minority community to sort it out. A great example is the young woman, Shabina Begum, who was Islamist jihadist in Syria of ISIS, an ISIS bride. Sorry, I just forgot that term. But, she is now no longer being allowed to return to Britain, and she has children there that are really British citizens who are not being given the care and the support that they deserve to be brought back to Britain and, helped to integrate back into society. Now, if she was a white English woman, she would be allowed to come back to Britain, and she should face prosecution here for sure, because jihadi brides, even though they were victims, they also victimized other women under ISIS. They were very instrumental in suppressing women who didn't toe the line, who weren't properly veiled, and all of that. So they did play a role in the suppression. But what I'm saying is that citizenship rights should extend to people, even if they're brown or black or, from minority backgrounds. So the same rights that would be extended to anybody else who lives in this country. And I think what we see is, for example, when you come from a Muslim background, you do have lesser rights because you are told that this is your culture, this is your religion, you need to respect it. If you have an issue to do with domestic violence, here's the Sharia court. You've got the police, you've got social services referring Muslim women to Sharia courts, which is an abomination and a scandal, really. So we're saying, look, treat people as citizens. Don't treat them as minorities. Imagine that they're white. Treat them the same way as you would treat a white citizen. You would expect them to have the highest standards and rights. Why not someone who comes from a minority background? But
all people should be treated as, to the highest standards of their rights and equal under the law. I mean, that is one law for all is one of the secular principles that I've adhered to and advocated for years. So I want to thank you for talking about the Paris Appeal. I've got a few other questions on a couple other topics. I'm linked to the Paris Appeal in the show notes, so people that want to read it can go there and read this document in full. And thank you for taking the time to explain so much of that to me. And I just want to underline that I agree with the basic premise that if we are going to improve the world, if we're going to improve the countries and the communities in which we live, that activism is required, that organizing is required, that dissent is necessary, so that we can make the argument that things can be better, and show the way, and hopefully convince others, and particularly those in power, but also allies that are not, to move forward to make things better. And I think the Paris Appeal is a step in that direction. So thank you for that.
Can I just add that the Centre for Inquiry is also a signatory of the Paris Appeal, and we are asking organizations across the globe to sign on to this appeal, so
Okay.
that we can just show. So hopefully those of your listeners who belong to organizations who might be interested in signing, we would love to hear from them.
Yeah. And I know that we do have listeners from several secular-minded organizations within Canada. So if you are a member of one of them, please read the Paris Appeal, bring it back to the leaders of your organization, and if you approve of its sentiment, please consider becoming a signatory. Now, I want to talk about some of your other work that you've done. Earlier this month, there was World Hijab Day. And can you tell us what that is and your role in it?
Well, World Hijab Day is a day that celebrates the hijab. And this year, their theme was strength in veiling, and the fact that there's, you get strength from being veiled. And the point that we've made during this day is that the hijab is a tool that is used to control and police women's bodies and girls' bodies and sexuality, and that if you look at the veil, socially speaking, on a mass scale, it's very much an imposition, particularly, this idea that women are strong if they're veiled. Actually, there's no strength in veiling, because you are complying with a religious rule. You're complying with religion, with your father, with your brother, with your husband, that says that in order for you to be a good, modest woman, you need to be covered up. Mm-hmm. And in fact, our argument is that there is strength in unveiling, because there you're challenging the status quo, and you're saying that your body is not something that needs to be concealed. There's nothing wrong with it. It isn't the source of fitna or chaos in society. So our argument is that, women who veil, many of them don't choose to do so. And if you look in countries like Iran or Afghanistan, you can be killed for not wearing the veil, for challenging veiling rules. As we know in Iran, with the Mahsa Jina Amini revolution that started there in September of the year before, where a woman was killed for what was considered improper veiling. And hundreds have been killed, tens of thousands have been arrested since then for demanding an end to compulsory veiling rules.
Yeah, I think it's the notion that, which I've heard several times, that all women in my country want to veil. This is it's such a good thing that it's voluntary is ludicrous. First of all, there's nothing that all women want. It comes, I guess, back to the communitarian thing that we talked about at the start of this episode. Women are as diverse as men, and on any issue, there's going to be women on opposite sides. And to say that all women want any single thing, and in this case, want to veil, is a ridiculous concept. There's one issue that has split the Canadian secular community almost in half, and I was wondering if I could get your insights on that. The Quebec government, Quebec is the second largest province in Canada by population. It passed a law that civil servants, so people that work for the state, and this includes teachers, cannot wear a hijab as part of their duties. And there's been some court cases about this, and the judge, one of the judges in the case, noted that this, while it affects the law states, among other things, that no ostentatious religious symbols can be worn. So it's not specifically talking about the veil or the hijab. But one of the judges in one of the court cases noted that the impact, whatever the intention, the impact of this bill disproportionately affects Muslim women who, for whatever reason, are wearing the hijab to work, and these are primarily teachers. And the Canadian secular community is split on this, and a large number think that this is a great law. They're very much anti-hijab, and they view teachers as because schools are funded by the government, they are therefore representatives of the state, and it is entirely appropriate for teachers, for the government to forbid teachers, among others, to be wearing any religious symbols, and that it is preventing the indoctrination of children. And so all of these goals are noble, and therefore the law is a good thing. Whereas on the other side, people that are equally adamantly secular in their perspective are saying that, look, we don't want the government ruling on what is religious and what isn't religious. The government should be neutral, and basically the government should not be telling women what to wear or what not to wear, beyond hard hats on, unless there's a health and safety concern where it's mandatory for all. The government should not be telling anybody, or should not be telling, and in this case, women, what they must or must not wear, and not to adjudicate on what is or is not a religious symbol. And I don't think that people on either side of this debate are going to defend the hijab or as a good symbol, or as something that what the hijab represents is a good thing. But they do defend either the state mandating laic and strict separation of church and state, and or people defending a woman's right to choose what to wear or not wear. And this has not been resolved. This is a case that will be going to the Supreme Court. And I was wondering if you had any insights or thoughts about this particular issue that has really been a divisive one, and one that we have not been able to resolve within our secular community in Canada. It really is a flashpoint and continues to be a very sore point of contention.
Well, I mean, I think there's so many points that I really would like to make. One is that, it is a health and safety concern, because the hijab has hugely negative impact on the physical and psychological well-being of children. Children in countries where the veil is compulsory have vitamin D deficiency. They have diseases that are linked to, like osteoporosis, that are linked to vitamin D deficiency because their body doesn't get the sunlight that it deserves. Plus, for those who are defending it, I suggest that they walk around it, with it, and the restrictions that it entails. Imagine on a child, because we're talking about a school here, and I know the teacher.
The restriction is not on teachers. It's not on students, but on teachers. Okay.
The teacher who wears the hijab makes a moral statement that it is better to be veiled. It is more modest. It is more appropriate. That is the perfect role of a woman, a good Muslim woman. And that is a moralizing lesson to children who are meant to be safeguarded from views that, in my opinion, are hugely misogynist and detrimental to the welfare of women and girls. So, for those who say it's just a question of clothing, it's not just a question of clothing, because that hijab means that if you are not modest, if you are not veiled, that you will be the source of fitna or chaos in society. An unveiled woman is a woman like, the woman who wears a skirt that's too short. In Iran, if you're caught unveiled, you're considered as someone who is promoting nudity and prostitution. So you are the source of chaos and fitna in society. And as a result, if anything happens to you, it's your fault because you weren't dressed properly. So it is that argument. It is an extension. Modesty culture is an extension of rape culture. It says that if you are not modest enough, what happens to you is your fault. It's your skirt that wasn't long enough. It's you who wasn't wearing a hijab. And we know that in schools, when the hijab is sort of promoted, they saw this very clearly in France, that it put pressure on the girls who didn't want to be veiled, because a good girl was the one who was veiled. And when they also said children should be veiled in French schools as well, a vast majority of girls, maybe 10 girls, didn't go to school. Otherwise, for everybody else, and for many of them, it was a relief. So I think we have to also look at it from that perspective. I'm kind of fed up of hearing this idea of hijab being a choice. Well, you can say that FGM is a choice. It's the choice of mothers who decide to mutilate their children. Sati, which is a practice where women have to throw themselves on the burning pyres of their husbands, because why do they need to live after their husband dies? That is also a choice. You've actually got studies in India that show that the 40 women who did sati, 39 of them chose to do so. Choice in a context which is about a religious imposition where many comply doesn't necessarily make it a free choice. And to bring that into a school setting, I think is hugely detrimental. So I think it's really important that teachers don't have conspicuous religious symbols on them, because it puts pressure on children. There are, especially, if you come from a minority community where you're constantly told that you need to be veiled, you need to be fasting during Ramadan. You go into a shop, the shopkeeper says, "What are you buying food for now? This is Ramadan, you should be fasting." There's this constant pressure on you. You definitely don't want to see it at school. And I think that it's for secularists that think, that this is not the role of the state. Well, whose role is it to protect children's rights in school? Whose role is it? This is a prescription to leave children to the mercy of their parents and teachers who, my son actually, I sent him to Persian school, where to learn Persian here in the UK. And he had a teacher who was veiled, who kept telling him that, "Is your mother veiled? It's really good for women to be veiled. We have to respect our culture. We have to respect our religion." And at college, in fact, here where we live as well, he went for a business BTech class. There was a Muslim woman who was veiled, and she was saying, "Oh, you're from Iran. Oh, mashallah, you must be Muslim. I'm so happy to hear this. Is your mom veiled? Do you have any sisters? What are they doing?" Especially when we're talking about a period when religious fundamentalism is in control, where it rules in states, where people are actually being stoned to death in the 21st century, where we have Sharia courts, where women are being killed for compulsory veiling. Please, hiding behind choice so that you don't come firmly on the side of children's rights and a secular state. This is the whole point of the Paris Appeal. Laics of the world have the guts and the courage to stand up for separation in all of its forms, have the guts to do it, because the religious right is destroying lives and rights across the board. And we are being wishy-washy and talking about choice when this is an issue of children's rights and of women's rights.
I can't think of a better note than to end on than that very passionate one. So, Maryam Namazie, thank you so much for being on Podcast for Inquiry. You do so much more than what we have talked about today. If people want to find out more about you, how do they find you online?
Yep, I've got a website, maryamnamazie.com, the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain, ex-Muslim, x-muslim.org.uk, and onelawforall.org.uk. These are some of the organizations I work with, but if they just do a search, they'll be able to find that information.
Okay, well, I will include links to all three organizations in the show notes, and this has been an illuminating conversation. Maryam Namazie, thank you so much for taking the time and speaking with me today on Podcast for Inquiry.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Links for today's discussion can be found in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please show your support at patreon.com/podcastforinquiry and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Email us podcast@centerforinquiry.ca. We'd love to hear your perspective. The Podcast for Inquiry is brought to you by the Centre for Inquiry Canada. We are a national educational charity supporting reason, compassion, and secular values. Help us support rational discourse and evidence-based decision-making by becoming a member at centerforinquiry.ca/join. CFIC is on the web and Facebook and Twitter at CFI Canada. Podcast for Inquiry is produced and edited by Lee Shields, Zach Dumont, and Martin Zielinski. Music by Anthony Lazaro. I'm your host, Leslie Rosenblood. See you next time.